As the title of this video says, this is the No Nut November motherboard. First of all, it has the word edge in its name. MSI had been teasing us for months. They first introduced this board back in May 2025 and said it would be out in August. To August, they delayed this till October. Fast forwarded to October, they delayed it again to November. November came, the board was still nowhere to be found. It was finally made available in the beginning of December when I was out for my vacation. Because I thought this board would be out soon, I bought the Ryzen 9 9950X 3D in May 2025 when this CPU was constantly out of stock. I did not expect not to be able to use this chip for months. Anyway, the 9950X 3D is finally installed in the motherboard. I used the fake Tech contact frame to keep the thermal paste from seeping to the side of the IHS. These contact frames are getting more popular, so just grab the cheapest one. Before continuing with the build, there's one issue that I want to address, which is the Wi-Fi antennas. I avoided buying new Asus and Gigabyte motherboards because they have the easy Wi-Fi shit. I thought there would be no issue with MSI because the Wi-Fi connectors have the small threads. However, the threads were too deep, so my existing antenna could not reach them. I also despise these ugly stock Wi-Fi antennas that usually come with on motherboards, so I will attempt to replace the Wi-Fi headers with these, which are called UFL to SMA, MHF4 to RBSMA female. Goddamn, that's a mouthful. In order to access the Wi-Fi module, we need to remove the VRM heatsink. First, we need to remove the I/O shield. There are 4 screws holding them. 2 are located in the back of the board. Then we remove 2 more at the bottom to free up the I/O shield. The VRM heatsink is held by the 2 screws. This piece of metal is also a heatsink. As you can see, there is a piece of thermal pad. We don't need to remove that heatsink, so I secure it with tape to avoid damaging the thermal pad. After that, carefully lift and remove the top heatsink. You can also unplug the VRM fan before or after these steps. Once the heatsink is out, we can get the Wi-Fi module by removing 2 more screws at the bottom of the board. The Wi-Fi can now be pulled out. To access the Wi-Fi card, first we unscrew the metal shield. And to remove the Wi-Fi connectors, you can use a small wrench or this tool to unscrew the 2 nuts. Use a flathead screwdriver to unclip the metal shield. We need to get the Wi-Fi card out by removing a screw. In the future, this is how you replace your Wi-Fi. Get the Wi-Fi out of the metal housing, then pull the connectors out of their mounting holes. Finally, detach the plastic clip and the Wi-Fi connectors can now be replaced. Follow the step backward to reassemble the Wi-Fi module to the motherboard. You can see that I can use my old Wi-Fi antenna. So the connectors I used for the MSI Wi-Fi were not the one I bought on Amazon, because while waiting for them to arrive, I actually salvaged the connectors from my Asus B550i motherboard. Unlike the new MSI board, accessing the Wi-Fi module was super easy as all I need to do was removing the plastic cover of the VRM heatsink. Then, the new connectors were put on the Asus board's Wi-Fi. The threads of the new connectors for the Wi-Fi antenna are very long, so when I screw in the antenna, you can see the threads stick out a lot more. for connectors that come with most motherboards, and in this case the Asus board, when I screw the Wi-Fi antenna in, the length is just enough and it looks better. To fix this, I used the nuts and washers from the removed MSI connectors and added them to the new ones. This prevented the threads from sticking out too much, even though it is a minor thing, but I think this looks a lot better. That's how you replace the proprietary Wi-Fi connectors on the MSI board. I am unsure how easy to fix, but you may be able to do the same thing on Asus and Gigabyte Easy Wi-Fi Grab. If you need to buy the connectors, I have the link in the description. Back to the build. One of the main reasons we all want to buy this board is this expansion card, which allows us to add one more NVMe SSD. However, if you have multiple normal hard drives or 2.5-inch SATA SSDs, you can only use 2 of them instead of 4 as normal. It also has the 27W USB 3.1 Gen 2 header and one male USB-C header to use with the included USB 3.0 adapter. I wish the header was a female USB-C so that I could plug any USB-C cable directly without needing this pigtail cable. And using an open-air PC with that cable dangling around doesn't look good, so I skipped it. MSI includes a bag of 3 M.2 screws in this bag, but we only need to use one to install the SSD to the expansion card. And I wish these are put inside a Ziploc instead of this bag, because once opened, they can be lost. I mounted a 4TB Team Group NVMe SSD on the expansion card. Because the NVMe will be next to RAM, which limits the clearance, I used a very slim heatsink which I got from the Oracle USB SSD enclosure. The gap between the SSD heatsink and my RAM is about 1mm, so it is very tight. Speaking about RAM, I have two options. First is 48GB of G.SKILL Trident Z5 RGB, which I have been a big fan of how their memory looks in DDR4. The speed is 8400 MHz CL40, which is not recommended for AMD. The second option is 64GB of 6000 MHz CL30 X-Power RGB memory. Having 64GB of RAM is very helpful, especially when I work on editing videos. They also look really nice and have a lower profile. These both are big upgrade from my previous Intel system, which has 32GB of RAM. While editing the first part of this video, I checked the memory usage and it showed I used 27GB. Of course, some of it came from having both Chrome and Firefox opened, but I definitely need to download more RAM. I decided to go with the Trident Z sticks as their color matches better with the build, and I'm curious if the board can handle fast memory. On MSI website, they advertise that this board can support 10,000 MHz memory. For extra storage, I have the second Team Group 4TB NVMe SSD installed at the top slot. This slot is completely toolless, which makes swapping storage super easy. My main storage would be in this 8TB Western Digital SN850X, which I install at the bottom of the board as it won't be taken out. And to keep it cool, I use the full copper heatsink for it. One more thing is this MSI USB stick, which contains the drivers for this board. Well, the board was dead. What I did was booting to the BIOS, updated the BIOS to the latest January version, then I enabled the XMP profile of the RAM, opened Counter-Strike 2 and the system crashed mid-game. After that, I was not able to boot the PC as it crashed instantly after pressing the power button. Only the RGB of my RAM stick lit up. I tried clearing CMOS and using the flash BIOS button to reflash, but it did not work. I checked to see if this killed my chip, but there was no burn marks on the CPU or the board. However, once I removed the CPU, I could use the quick flash button, but when I reinstalled the chip, the PC could not boot. I even verified that my 9950 X3D was still fine by putting it in the MSI B650i Edge motherboard. There was nothing wrong with it. The problem was the X870i board. I got the replacement, but I did not update the BIOS, and this one came with the October version, which was similar to the dead board. I enabled XMP and the system hung mid-game, but this time it did not crash, so I could press the reset button to reboot the PC. So what killed the motherboard? Was it the BIOS or the memory? I don't know. Anyway, to keep the system stable, I used MSI Memory Trident to set my speed to 6000 MHz CL30. I also set the voltage for the RAM to 1.35 volts. Finally, to keep the CPU from getting too hot, I used PPO to set Curve Optimizer to -20. And of course, I still use the BIOS that came with the motherboard. With the build is now ready, it's time to relax and play some games. By the way, I am using OpenRGB to control the RGB on my system. The current stable build has not been updated for this motherboard, so you need to download the experimental build. Do not use MSI Mystic Lite because MSI Center is a bloatware. The first game is of course Counter-Strike. Switching from the i9 12900K has a noticeable boost in performance. First was the loading time. Since the game was updated from CSGO to CS2, it takes forever to boot the game. Now, the wait time is significantly shorter, and I am so happy with it. Secondly, in the map Mirage, my resolution is 1440p, and the FPS is very high. Sometimes it even hits 500 FPS. So finally, my 1440p 360Hz monitor is actually worth it. For games which are GPU bound, there's no difference, especially at high resolutions. So don't buy this CPU if your focus is gaming. Save the money for a 9800 X3D and a good graphic card. And if you buy an X3D chip, thanks to its cache, RAM speed and capacity don't matter much, so you can save extra and buy the cheapest kit. You just saw what happened when I use fast RAM. For editing videos in Premiere Pro, the effect I use most is Warp Stabilizer to stabilize shaky camera shots, and this effect utilizes CPU processing power as my CPU fans usually ramp up. I can't find the information if Warp Stabilizer uses multi-cores or single core, but for 4K 60fps clips which are around 20 to 30 seconds, I can see it finishes faster by 30 plus seconds with this new system. From my thermal camera, I could see the VRM heatsink was around 65 degrees and max temperature was 70 degrees, which is similar to what I saw in Hardware Info 64 under MOS temp. But this is an open air system, so the temperature is lower. If you put it in an ITX case with limited airflow, I think we can expect an extra 10 degrees. The weirdest one was the chipset 1 temperature, which stayed at 94.5 degrees. I am not sure if I should worry about it, but I'll ignore it. So that is it about the MSI X870 No Nut November DOA motherboard, and I hope it would be helpful for you. This also marked the end of owning an Intel PC for me. Who knows if I would be back to Intel in the future, but I hope this system would last me a long time. Finger crossed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.